So now that we've modified our header component to be receiving the current user value from our reducer, we now have to actually update our app component so that it's able to update the reducer value with the new setCurrentUser action that we made. So how do we do that? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to have to modify our app component with connect as well. So we're going to import connect from React Redux. And just like we did earlier with our header component, we're going to connect our app to the outcome of our initial connect call using the second argument of connect, which is map dispatch to props. Now, the first argument is map state to props, but our app doesn't actually need current user anymore, because outside of passing it into our header, it only sets it, but it doesn't do anything with the current user value in its component itself. So what we can do is pass in null as the first argument, because we don't need any state to props from our reducer. The second argument will be our map dispatch to props, which is a function that gets this dispatch property, and then similarly will return an object where the prop name will be whatever prop we want to pass in that dispatches the new action that we're trying to pass, which is setCurrentUser. So let's import in setCurrentUser because we need that action. So we're going to import from Redux, user actions, setCurrentUser. Now, what we'll end up returning inside of our map dispatch will be setCurrentUser, but it goes to a function that gets the user object and then calls dispatch. And what dispatch is it is a way for Redux to know that whatever you're passing me, whatever object you're passing me, is going to be an action object that I'm going to pass to every reducer. So our user action is a function that gets the user but returns an action object. So we are going to call our action, but we're going to pass that user in so that what we're doing is we're invoking setCurrentUser with the user that will then be used as the payload. But this returns the object. So we're just dispatching the object. And now we're going to pass map dispatch to props as the second argument of connect. And now we'll have this value of setCurrentUser. So we don't need this constructor anymore. And instead, what we're going to do is we are going to replace this setState code with our setCurrentUser action code. So what we'll say is we will say this.props.setCurrentUser with the value. And now we're going to still pass in that object with our snapshot whenever our snapshot comes in, but we want to set the current user value to it. Now, because we're also going to do it here, let's actually destructure this off of our props. setCurrentUser equals this.props. And then instead of now using props, we can just call setCurrentUser and similarly do the same thing here. But we don't need to pass it an object with current user. We just need what the object we want to update it with. And now if we save, whenever our user snapshot updates, we are setting the user reducer value with our new object. And we can actually see this in our application because of our null. Wait, what is this? This.state. Oh, whoops. So our header doesn't actually need current user anymore. So we're accidentally passing that in still. So now if we look, we'll see this in our console log. So what these are actually messages that we're getting from Redux Logger, that library we included when we yarn installed React and React Redux. What the logger tells us is the state of our Redux after any action is fired. So each one is actually these 3 sections. The first section is the state before the action was fired. The second one is the action itself. And then the third one is the state after the action has modified any of our reducers. So if we look, the first time our reducer was in the state where our user was equal to current user of null. This was the initial state of our user reducer. This was our action where we had a payload of our, you remember, our user auth object, right? The big object that we get back from our Firebase. And then the type is set current user. And then the next state will, of course, now have our current user value be equal to that payload value. Just as we know that this is what Redux is doing, right? The reducer code. Now, if we look at this next one, this is after we get the snapshot. After the snapshot modifies our user auth object to now be our database user object. So we'll see, as before, right? Our current user is equal to that big object. And then it fires again because our on snapshot code is now firing set current user. And what we'll get is our object that we are storing in our database. Display name Mike, email Mike, right? And then here we'll see that our reducer is now up to date with our new modified database object. And if we look at our header, we actually see that it says sign out again because now we're actually triggering our reducer to store the current user value that we are passing in with our map state to props into our header. So this is that flow we were talking about. This is how we're able to bring in all of our state props into our components, right? But now they're separated because now our header is no longer dependent on app passing it in, but our app still updates our user reducer value, so our header is able to get the latest current user property. This separation is a wonderful thing because now our components are truly components. They're isolated, individual, and only know what context they need to be aware of. Now, if we hit sign out, we will see, right, we are setting current user again, but this time with our null value because we've signed out, right? And then if we sign in with our email and password, we'll see that we fire another action again, but this time we are now with our user again. So that's the flow of Redux. Now we're going to do this pattern many times because practice makes perfect and we're learning a lot of stuff in this lesson. But this will be incredibly useful to us in the next following sections of building our application. Now, let's just commit our code and move on. So let's go back and see what we added. So we know we added our Redux. So we'll say added Redux and implemented user reducer and user actions to header and app components. And now we'll git push and let's keep building our application.